Hollywood Boulevard, 1973. A spring morning when the smog hung low and the sidewalks told stories nobody wanted to hear. Marlon Brando, the greatest actor who ever lived, was driving through the heart of the city he both loved and despised. Then he saw him. An elderly Native American man wrapped in a torn blanket sleeping against the filthy wall of a closed-down theater. Most people drove past. Most people always do. But Brando stopped. What happened in the next 60 seconds would set off a chain of events that Hollywood tried desperately to bury. A story of shame, courage, and a debt this country never wanted to pay. Here is the story. The early 70s in Hollywood were a strange, wounded time. The golden age was dead. The studio system had collapsed. The streets that once sparkled with premier lights now reeked of exhaust and disappointment. Sunset Boulevard was lined with runaways and dreamers who'd run out of dreams. And on Hollywood Boulevard itself, where the stars were embedded in the concrete, the real stars rarely walked anymore. Marlon Brando was 49 years old. He'd just finished filming The Godfather, a performance that would go down as one of the greatest in cinematic history. He was about to win his second Academy Award. He had money, he had fame, he had power. But if you looked closely, if you really looked into those eyes that had captivated millions, you'd see something else. Rage. A burning, righteous fury at what America had become. Because Brando wasn't just an actor, he was an activist long before it was fashionable. While other celebrities were buying yachts and snorting cocaine at pool parties, Brando was reading about Wounded Knee. He was learning about broken treaties. He was understanding, really understanding, that Hollywood was built on stolen land, and the people who'd been here first were now invisible. That morning, Brando was driving his beat-up Mercedes. He refused to buy new cars, refused to play the game. His hair was longer now, graying at the temples. He wore simple clothes, a plain shirt, jeans that had seen better days. He didn't look like a movie star. He looked like a man carrying the weight of 1,000 truths nobody wanted to hear. The sun was cutting through the smog at a harsh angle, the kind of light that makes everything look both beautiful and unbearably sad. The radio was playing something forgettable. Brando wasn't listening. He was thinking about the script he'd just read. Another mob movie they wanted him to do. Another $1 million to play another violent man. He was tired. So tired of pretending. That's when he saw the figure huddled against the wall. The theater behind the man had closed years ago. The marquee was broken, half the letters missing. Graffiti covered the Art Deco facade. And there, in the shadow of what Hollywood used to be, sat an old man who looked like he'd been forgotten by time itself. Brando's foot hit the brake, hard. The car behind him honked, swerved, the driver shouting something obscene. Brando didn't hear it. He was staring at the man's face, the deep lines carved by weather and hardship, the long gray hair matted and unwashed. The blanket that might have once had colors, but was now just shades of dirt and despair. And Brando knew. He knew exactly what he was looking at. Not a homeless man, not a drunk, not another casualty of the city's indifference. He was looking at a ghost, a living ghost of the genocide nobody wanted to remember. Brando pulled over, parking illegally. He didn't care. He got out of the car, his hands shaking slightly. This wasn't nerves. This was anger mixing with heartbreak, a combination that had fueled him for years. He'd been raised to see people, really see them. His mother, alcoholic and brilliant, had taught him that much. She'd told him stories about injustice, about the voiceless, about the ones society threw away. His father, cold and distant, had taught him the opposite. But Brando had chosen his mother's path, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. As he walked toward the man, he noticed the details. The man's feet were bare, cracked and bleeding. His hands, resting on his knees, were gnarled with arthritis. There was a cardboard sign next to him, but the words had been washed away by rain. Maybe it had said veteran. Maybe it had said hungry. Maybe it had said please. It didn't matter now. The words were gone, just like the promises. Brando knelt down. The sidewalk was filthy, stained with oil and God knows what else. He didn't care. He was eye level with the man now. The old man's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. For a moment, Brando thought he might be dead. "Sir," Brando said softly. His voice, that famous voice that had whispered and roared on screen, was gentle now, almost a whisper. "Sir, are you okay?" The man's eyes opened slowly. They were clouded with cataracts, but there was intelligence there. Dignity. He looked at Brando without recognition. Why would he recognize him? Movie stars didn't kneel on Hollywood Boulevard. Movie stars didn't stop. "I'm fine," the man said. His voice was a rasp, damaged by years of cold nights and harsh smoke. "Just resting." Brando felt something crack inside his chest. Just resting. As if sleeping on concrete was a choice. As if this was acceptable. "When did you last eat?" Brando asked. The man shrugged. "Yesterday, maybe." "Where are you from?" "Pine Ridge." The man said it like it was a prayer, like it was the only truth he had left. Pine Ridge, the reservation in South Dakota, one of the poorest places in America. Brando knew it well. He'd been studying the American Indian movement. He'd been sending money, making calls, trying to understand how a country that called itself great could treat its first people like they were nothing. Quick question: have you ever seen something so wrong, so fundamentally unjust, that it changed the entire direction of your life? Have you ever had a moment where you couldn't look away, couldn't make excuses, couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine? Let us know in the comments, because that's what happened to Brando on that sidewalk. This wasn't the first time he'd seen poverty. This wasn't the first time he'd seen a Native American treated like garbage in their own land. But something about this moment, this man, this place, crystallized everything. The hypocrisy, the cruelty, the absolute moral bankruptcy of Hollywood, of America, of a system that celebrated him while erasing people like this. "What's your name?" Brando asked. Robert Two Hawks." The man said it with pride, with the kind of dignity that can't be stolen, even when everything else has been taken. Brando extended his hand. "Marlon." They shook hands. Robert's grip was weak but steady, and in that handshake, something shifted. This wasn't charity. This wasn't a rich man helping a poor man. This was recognition. Human to human. Soul to soul. "Robert," Brando said, sitting down fully on the sidewalk now, not caring about his clothes, not caring about the people walking past and staring. "I want to help you, but I need you to tell me something first. How did you end up here?" Robert Two Hawks looked away, toward the traffic, toward the smog-covered hills in the distance. When he spoke, his voice carried decades of pain. "I came here in 1945, he said. "After the war. I was a Marine. Iwo Jima. They told us we were heroes. They told us we'd come home to opportunities. So I came to Hollywood. Thought maybe I could work in the movies. Thought maybe things would be different here." Brando felt his jaw tighten. He knew where this story was going. He'd heard versions of it before. "For a while I got work," Robert continued, "playing Indians in westerns, always the savage, always the one getting shot. They'd put makeup on me, make me look more Indian for the white audiences. Give me broken English to speak, even though I'd grown up speaking perfect English and Lakota both." He laughed, a bitter sound. "They paid me $15 a day. The white actors playing cowboys got $200. Brando closed his eyes. The rage was building, hot and righteous in his gut. Then the work dried up, Robert said. Westerns went out of style, and suddenly, nobody needed Indians anymore. I tried other jobs, construction, dishwashing, but nobody wanted to hire a 50-year-old Indian. So I started drinking, lost my apartment, lost touch with my family back home. And here I am, on a sidewalk in Hollywood, the city that used my face, and then threw me away. Silence. Pure silence. Even the traffic seemed to fade. Brando was staring at this man, this veteran, this human being who had fought for a country that never fought for him. Robert, Brando said, his voice thick with emotion, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to believe me. What happened to you is a crime. Not a crime of law, a crime of conscience. This country owes you everything. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure people know it. Robert looked at him with those clouded eyes, and for the first time, Brando saw a flicker of hope. Or maybe it was just surprise. Nobody talked like this. Nobody said these things out loud. Brando stood up and pulled out his wallet. He took out every bill he had, $300. He pressed it into Robert's hand. This isn't charity, Brando said firmly. This is a down payment on a debt this entire industry owes you, a debt I owe you. Robert stared at the money, his hands trembling. I can't. Yes, you can, Brando interrupted. And you will, because you're going to use this to get a room, get some food, get cleaned up. And then you're going to let me help you get home. Back to Pine Ridge. Back to your people. Because you don't belong on this sidewalk, Robert. You never did. Tears were rolling down Robert Two Hawks' face now. Silent tears that carried years of humiliation, of being invisible, of being used and discarded. And Brando, the man who could play any emotion on screen, wasn't acting now. He was crying too. But this was just the beginning. Because Marlon Brando didn't do anything small. He didn't do symbolic gestures. When he committed completely. And what happened next would shock the world. Brando took Robert to a nearby hotel. Not a fancy one. A clean, simple place where Robert could rest. He paid for a month up front. He bought him clothes. He sat with him for hours, listening to stories about the war, about the reservation, about a life that Hollywood had tried to turn into a caricature. And then Brando made a phone call to the producers of The Godfather, to the Academy of Arts and Sciences, to everyone who mattered in Hollywood. I'm not coming to the Oscars, he told them. They thought he was joking. Marlon Brando, about to win Best Actor for the most iconic performance of the decade, not attending, impossible. I'm serious, Brando said, his voice like steel. And I'm sending someone in my place, someone who's going to tell America the truth about what we've done to Native Americans, the truth about Hollywood's role in that genocide, the truth that nobody wants to hear. The executives panicked, they threatened, they pleaded, but Brando didn't care. He'd made his decision. And on March 27, 1973, when his name was called as Best Actor, a young Apache woman named Sacheen Littlefeather walked onto that stage in traditional dress and declined the award on his behalf. She spoke for 60 seconds about Wounded Knee, about broken treaties, about the portrayal of Native Americans in film. The audience booed. They actually booed. But Brando didn't care, because he'd done something more important than win an Oscar. He'd given a voice to the voiceless. He'd used his platform to amplify a truth that America desperately needed to hear. For decades, people thought they knew the whole story. Brando refused the Oscar. Brando was a political radical. Brando didn't care about Hollywood anymore. But that was just the surface, the part people saw, the part that made headlines. What nobody knew, what was kept hidden for over 40 years, was the rest of the story. The part about Robert Two Hawks. After the Oscar ceremony, Brando didn't just send Robert home. He created a fund, a private fund that supported Native American veterans who were homeless in Los Angeles. He personally paid for housing, medical care, job training. He did it anonymously, through lawyers and accountants, because he didn't want the publicity. This wasn't about his image, this was about justice. He stayed in touch with Robert until the old man died in 1989, peacefully, in his home on Pine Ridge, surrounded by family. And when Robert died, he left behind a letter he'd written years earlier, but instructed his family not to release until after Brando's death. That letter was finally revealed in 2008, 4 years after Brando passed away. In it, Robert Two Hawks described that day on Hollywood Boulevard. But he also revealed something else, something that brought tears to the eyes of everyone who read it. Robert wrote, "Marlon Brando didn't just give me money that day. He gave me back my dignity. He looked at me like I was human, like I mattered, like my life had value. In that moment, on that filthy sidewalk, he saw me, not as an Indian, not as a drunk, not as a victim, but as a man, a Marine, a human being worthy of respect. That gift, that simple act of seeing me, saved my life. Because I was ready to die that morning. I was ready to give up. And then a stranger stopped, and everything changed." The letter continued, detailing how Brando had visited Pine Ridge multiple times, bringing supplies, meeting with tribal leaders, using his money and influence to support schools and health clinics. None of this was ever publicized. None of it made the news, because Brando didn't want credit. He wanted change. Hollywood, of course, tried to bury the story. The studios that had made billions off stereotypical portrayals of Native Americans didn't want to be reminded of their complicity. The actors who'd played cowboys shooting Indians for cheap entertainment didn't want to confront their role in cultural genocide. And the Academy certainly didn't want to revisit that Oscar night, when they'd booed a Native American woman for speaking truth. But the truth has a way of surviving. Robert's letter got out. It was shared in Native American communities. It was published in small newspapers on reservations across the country. And slowly, people began to understand. Marlon Brando wasn't just an actor who rejected an Oscar. He was a man who put his money where his mouth was, who saw injustice and acted, who gave up fame and respect and industry approval to do what was right. So what does this story tell us about Marlon Brando? What does it reveal about the man behind the legend? It tells us that true courage isn't about playing heroes on screen. It's about being a hero when the cameras are off, when nobody's watching, when there's nothing to gain and everything to lose. Brando could have driven past Robert Two Hawks that morning. He could have thrown some money out the window and felt good about himself. He could have made a small donation to a charity and moved on with his life. But that wasn't who he was. Brando didn't do half measures. He didn't do comfortable activism. He burned bridges. He sacrificed relationships. He turned his back on the industry that made him a star because he understood something fundamental. Some things are more important than fame. For the rest of his life, Brando was blacklisted by many in Hollywood. Directors didn't want to work with him. Studios found him difficult. He was labeled as radical, unstable, impossible. His career suffered. His reputation was damaged. But he never regretted it. Not for a second. Because on that sidewalk in 1973, Marlon Brando had a choice. Look away or look closer. Stay comfortable or get uncomfortable. Preserve his career or honor his conscience. And he chose conscience. Every single time. Today, when we think about celebrity activism, we think about Instagram posts and hashtags. We think about carefully curated statements written by publicists. We think about safe causes that won't hurt brand deals. But Brando showed us what real activism looks like. It's messy, it's costly, it's deeply personal, and it requires sacrifice. Robert Two Hawks died knowing that at least one person saw him, at least one person cared, at least one person was willing to risk everything to tell his story. And that, in the end, is the greatest legacy any of us can leave. To be remembered, not for what we achieved, but for how we treated people when we had the power to ignore them. So here's my question for you. If you saw someone in desperate need today, would you stop? Really stop? Not just drop some change and keep moving, but actually sit down, listen to their story, and commit to helping them? Or would you drive past, like most people do, telling yourself there's nothing you can do, that it's not your problem, that someone else will help? Leave your answer in the comments, because this isn't just a story about Marlon Brando. This is a story about all of us, about the choices we make when nobody's watching, about the kind of people we want to be. And unfortunately, they don't make men like Marlon Brando anymore.